We're getting a lot of inquiries about what are the best schooling fish for a nano tank, because as you know, schooling fish are fish that are more comfortable and have lower stress level at 6 or more. When you get 6 or more fish and they grow big, they outgrow any nano tank. So we need to find species that are small enough for a nano tank, adaptable enough to the aquatic environment. We selected 8 different species, and I think it would be very good for any small aquarium. There's a couple caveats when you get to the half-beaks, but the rest, they all get along fine. Welcome back to the Fish Files. First up, the most popular nanofish, Rasbora. A Rasbora is a whole family of fish that tend to be very small. There's a few of them get larger, like the clown Rasbora, but even the clown Rasbora has a cousin called the dwarf maculatus, which is a very small spotted Rasbora. It looks like the clown Rasbora, so we just call it the dwarf clown spot Rasbora. Rasboras, there's hundreds of them, but you really will probably only see a couple dozen in the pet trade. And I brought in from our warehouse probably the most common that you're going to find. Again, I say most common, they're still very hard to find, some of these species, in aquarium stores. You can find them online, places like aquariumfish.com. And a lot of times they get mixed up because they're small, and you have to know what you're doing when you bring these fish in. Most of them are wild caught from Asia. A few of them, like the Chili Rasbora and Phoenix Rasbora, look similar. So let's look at Chili Rasbora, which is one of the ones we sell the most of from the warehouse. Chili Rasbora has a very bright chili red pattern and a black sash along its body. That's often confused with the Phoenix Rasbora, dwarf maculatus Rasbora. There's a lot of other cheaper Rasboras that are substituted. You're trying to avoid that tan body and spotted body. Those Rasboras are typically, when I buy Rasboras, they're typically half or less of the price of the Chili Rasboras, but they're usually easier to get. Chili Rasboras are a little daintier to ship. Once they settle down in your tank, they're fine. Flake food's the best way to keep them fully nourished. Something like Omega, Tetra, Sarah. We prefer Sarah here, but any of the flake food will be fine. You don't have to mash it up into a powder. They will nip on the flakes, so that's a wise tale. You don't need to mash up flakes for little fish. That is a Chili Rasbora. I wouldn't put any less than 4 in even a small nano tank because they get stressed out when they're by themselves. 6 is a nice number, and they're also easy to spot. The whole point is to see them in your aquarium. And remember, even if they're, we have a close in focus on the show, you stand back 5 or 6 feet, it's hard to spot these guys. You have a school, they're much easier to see too. So that is the Chili or Brigitte Rasbora. The next Rasbora is its cousin. It's called the Phoenix Rasbora. Rasbora mera, M-E-R-A-H. Chili is Brigitte, this one's Mera. They are not the same fish, and they are virtually identical. I actually don't know if they can crossbreed in the wild. They are separate species. It wouldn't surprise me if there's hybrids around, because it's the only way you can distinguish them is the spot versus the sash on the body. And that takes a real close observation if they're on the juvenile side. And remember, these are wild caught, so oftentimes you're going to get smaller juvenile sized bodies on the fish when they come in. Also, nano tanks are designed with foam around the filters so they don't suck in these little guys. Make sure your tank, if you're going to bring in micro tiger, Brigitte, Phoenix Rasboras, Chili Rasboras, which are Brigitte Rasboras, just make sure your filter is suitable for nano species. If you have a shrimp tank, that's fine. You can put any nano fish in there. If you have a nanofish tank, that's fine. You can put any shrimp in there. You can't put it in a high-powered, good, hang on the back filter, canister filter system, because it's just going to suck in those little shrimp and fish. Now, our next fish on the list, it's slightly more expensive than the Chili and Phoenix Rasboras. This guy is called the Galaxy Rasbora, and it's been reclassified into a Danio, so it's a nano Danio species. Celestial Danio is a more proper common name for, the scientific name didn't change, but Celestial Danio is a more common proper name for what's been traditionally called the Galaxy Rasbora. We call them both, but both on my stock list when I send them out to stores, just in case there's some confusion. The reason it's called a Galaxy or Celestial is because it gives a star pattern on the body, and it has really nice red highlights around the body, but it's a star pattern that it's really gets its name from. The ones featured here are fully grown. These are full-size Galaxy Rasboras, so maybe a little more than half an inch, 3/4 of an inch, but they have a nice round oval body, so they look a little bit bigger than they are. But these guys are 0.6 inches in length. Since I went from the Chili Rasbora to the Phoenix Rasbora, we're going to go to another one that's really similar to the Galaxy or Celestial Rasbora. The next one up is the Micro Tiger Rasbora, or Rasbora erythromicron. The erythromicron Rasbora, instead of micro little spots on the body, has micro little stripes on the body. And the body gets more blue as it ages. So it's a very pretty fish. And it's the same price range as a Galaxy Rasbora, probably around $8 in a pet store. And this one, not as common as the Galaxy Rasboras. Because if you're a pet store, you know people want a nice, expensive Nano Rasbora. You're going to stock the most popular one. That's going to be the Galaxy Rasbora. But another one, I think just as pretty. In this case, they're juvenile, so they're not really displaying the blue color with the black stripes. Unfortunately, I just didn't have any in the warehouse. Hopefully, producer, if you can splice a full-grown Rasbora erythromicron, that'd be great. We call them Micro Tiger Rasboras because of those stripes. Makes it easier for the store owners to sell and discuss, but that's the fish, and it's very, very pretty. Again, around $8 in the pet store. And oh, by the way, all four of these fish are hardy enough for most aquariums, and they can handle temperatures from 65 to almost 80 degrees. Now, the hardiest are the ones that are most expensive, the Galaxy and the Micro Tiger Rasboras. But Chili and Phoenix, once they're settled into the tank, do well. Now, the next guy I have, these are wild caught, and I don't know anyone who tank breeds Rasbora cubatai or green cubatai Rasboras, but these guys have, they're similar to green axelrod Rasboras. They just don't have the reflective stripe. They get a very lime green as they age, and you can see in these juveniles they're starting to get that little green luminescence, but that really deepens as they grow into maturity. And again, these are schooling fish. They're nano fish. They get frightened if they're out in ones and twos. So you should get at least 4 for your nano tank. I have one in this group that inevitably I get a few with chipped fins or bitten tails because they're wild caught. Things happen to these guys in the wild. If you have a tail that is damaged, if you get a fish from online, for instance, send a picture to the online store. They will refund you. But don't worry about that fish. In a couple weeks, that tail, as long as they haven't damaged the growth line, that tail will start to grow back, and you actually see the beginning of the 2 tail fins coming out of it. And in a month, it should be fully grown again. If not, if it was cut too deep, the fish will either die or he'll learn to live with just a stunted little body. In the wild, he'd be eaten in a second, but your fish tank is going to live as long as the rest of the fish. So the next one we have, this one classically is not a schooling fish, but they do pal around like Pygmy Corydoras and other Corydoras. Pygmy Corydoras are probably the only Cory suitable for a nano tank. The other ones will, I think, outgrow nano tanks. But stone catfish, they come from Asia, Harris Jerdoni, and they are really neat fish. I have a full-grown one and a juvenile in here, and the full-grown guy's only like 1.5 inches. That's as big as they get. They're scavengers, so they're great for keeping the bottom of the tank clean. They're bottom dwellers, so you get a little activity on the bottom of the tank. A lot of these fish I've been showing you so far are mid-level and top-level dwellers, but these stone catfish will just hover around, and usually they'll pal around together like Corydoras do. So they're a little kind of neat accessory to the nano tank where you're going to have a lot of schooling fish. So sorry, did a little segue because I really like that fish and I don't often get it into the warehouse. The second to last fish I'm featuring is a very common Rasbora, the Emerald Eye Rasbora or Lamp Eye Rasbora. It's been in the trade for a long, long time, very affordable, typically $3. And it has a very bright eye, and you really miss the scene unless you have 6 or more of these guys. Then at night, if there's just a light in the room, and even if the light's off, you'll see these little reflective lights, which is their eyes. They have little reflective scales around their eyes. And it's probably an evolutionary trait where if something chases them and they see all these flashes, they get confused. And in other words, that schooling formation with all the flashes leads them to more likely than not safety. That's my theory. But regardless, they still have very flashy green eyes. So they're called Lamp Eye or Emerald Eye Rasbora. Very, very pretty fish. If they're small, you can't identify them right away from the reflective eye in your fish store, and they have a bunch of different species. Look for that black fin on the top of their body. So one of the most popular and definitely the most affordable Rasboras on the planet, the Emerald Eye Rasboras, are they are the hardiest nano tank species you're going to come across. I think for that reason alone, I recommend them. But remember, you're going to have to put at least 6 of them in the fish tank if you really want to see them. And now, last is the producer's favorite for some weird reason. I wanted to find a schooling fish that liked to float around the top dweller. And pygmy hatchet fish definitely would fit the bill, but pygmy hatchet fish, in my opinion, are just too dainty for nano tanks. So we got one called the platinum half-beak or albino half-beak. There's also a wrestling half-beak. All of those, they just don't have as good a color, and they are wild-caught, and the platinum half-beaks are tank-raised. The wild-caught ones, for whatever reason, usually wild-caught fish are super strong, but in the case of these wrestling half-beaks, they're wimpy. I don't like wrestling half-beaks for nano tanks, but platinum and albino half-beaks, their variants, are wonderful. But if you've ever seen the big giant Florida gar, big trap and they can eat anything, picture them shrunk down in a shrinking machine to 1.5 inches. That's what you have. These are micro gars. So there's certain fish you can't keep with them. They will eat, if you have endlers and you want to breed endlers, you can't keep with half-beaks. Half-beaks will eat those baby guppies. They'll also go after small Chili Rasboras and Phoenix Rasboras. Rasboras that are really micro are food for fully grown albino half-beak. But the rest of them, Celestio Daniels, micro tigers, emerald eyes, they're not going to bother them. Same thing with shrimp. Baby shrimp, these guys will eat, but full-grown shrimp, and I'm talking full-grown, like 1/2 inch, they won't bother. And they'll eat flake food. They don't need live predator fish like a big gar will. So they're wonderful fish, except that's the caveat fish. There's a few species, Phoenix Rasboras, Chili Rasboras, micro clown Rasboras, anything in that size range, probably can't keep them with. But the rest of them, they're fine. In fact, some of them have some personality that actually come to you for food. I don't know where they fit that little brain because there's almost no head space on that fish, but terrific little upper dweller fish for the nano tank. That all being said, if you don't have a nano tank, even if you have a big tank, please get a nano tank. Oh, and if you like the show, please subscribe. Am I saying that right? Please subscribe, and thank you for watching.